In 1896, Sigmund Freud published a paper with a bold and disturbing conclusion. Childhood sexual abuse was far more common than anyone wanted to admit, even in respectable families, and it was the hidden cause of serious psychological suffering in women. Within a few years, he completely reversed himself. He decided that women were imagining it. Their abuse was not real. It was fantasy born from childish sexual urges. The fathers were innocent. Understanding why Freud changed his story is not just a historical footnote. It explains how modernism, the culture we still live in today, was built on a foundation that was quietly rearranged to protect the powerful. For centuries, meaning came from outside the individual. God gave the world order. The church interpreted that order. Community gave you your role. Then came the Protestant Reformation, which said you did not need the church to access God. You had a direct line. That was liberating. But it also created a new and terrible anxiety. How do you know if you are saved? The Calvinists said your prosperity was evidence of God's favor, and this gave us modern capitalism. Others said jihad, self-sacrifice for God, was the proof. Kant tried to resolve the crisis through philosophy, arguing that we actively construct our experience of reality. Hegel said history itself was the unfolding of a cosmic consciousness. Marx flipped Hegel upside down and said history was really the story of class struggle, moving toward equality. And then came Freud, who said, forget all that. What actually drives human beings is not reason, not history, not God. It is repressed sexual desire. When Freud was a young doctor in Vienna, he was assigned patients the medical establishment dismissed as hysterics, mostly women who could not control their emotions. What Freud did that was unusual was simple. He listened to them. He won their trust over weeks and months and asked them directly, "Why are you like this?" And they told him. Again and again, in case after case, the story was the same. When they were young, a trusted adult had abused them. Freud was shocked at first. Then he heard the story enough times that he concluded they were telling the truth. He wrote it up in 1896. His argument was clear. Abuse is vastly more common than society admits. These women are not crazy. They are responding rationally to real trauma. He called it the seduction theory. Then he reversed himself. And the explanation is disturbingly simple. Freud was in private practice. His patients were young women from wealthy Viennese families. But who paid the bills? The fathers. If Freud told the father that his daughter's psychological problems were his fault, that father would stop paying and find another doctor. So, the later Freud produced a completely different theory. He said the women were not remembering real abuse, they were confabulating. They had innate sexual desires from childhood, what he called the Oedipus and Electra complexes. In one move, Freud went from being an advocate for women to being a spokesman for the men who were paying him. The women were not victims, they were fantasists. His private letters, only released decades later through a researcher named Jeffrey Masson, show that Freud was fully aware of the shift he was making and that he was under enormous social and professional pressure. The ideas Freud built on his new foundation, the unconscious, repression, the id, the ego, the superego, became the intellectual bedrock of an entire cultural movement called modernism. The core idea of modernism is the cult of the self. Your inner world is the most important thing. Your unconscious drives, your repressed desires, your psychological shadow, these are what you must explore, express, and liberate. This sounds like freedom, and in some ways it is, but notice what it does not say. It does not say systems of power cause suffering. It does not say social inequality traumatizes people. Instead it says, your problems come from inside you. The cure is self-examination, self-expression, and therapy. Not collective action, not systemic change, just work on yourself. Carl Jung, Freud's most brilliant student, improved on the theory in important ways. He introduced the collective unconscious, the shadow self, the idea that we each carry both masculine and feminine forces inside us. But Freud furiously rejected Jung's improvements and expelled him from the psychoanalytic community. Anyone who challenged the core framework was cast out. In both cases, a movement that started as a genuine attempt to address real suffering was transformed into something that served the interests of the powerful while using the language of liberation. Communism took the natural democratic impulse toward fairness and made it so extreme and so threatening that ordinary people fled from it, back toward the existing order. Freud took the genuine suffering of abused women and turned it into a theory of female fantasy that protected wealthy men from accountability. Both transformations happened not through open force but through the reshaping of ideas. The language stayed compassionate. The framework quietly shifted. We live in a culture that is deeply shaped by Freud's second theory, not his first. We celebrate therapy, self-improvement, personal development, mental health awareness. We believe deeply that most of our problems originate inside us. But when a system produces enormous suffering, when institutions fail people, when power abuses those beneath it, the cultural reflex to respond by asking what is wrong with the individual rather than what is wrong with the system is not neutral. It is the late Freud solution, not the early one. The early Freud, the one who listened to women and believed them, that Freud understood something that got buried when the bills needed paying. History tends to bury its most uncomfortable truths in exactly